So the earlier they call us, generally speaking, the better evidence we have that the termite company is, number one, doing the wrong thing, and number two, misrepresenting things to cover it up.
I'm Aaron Gartlan. This is the Trials Podcast, where we focus on the challenges the injured face and how we meet and deal with those challenges. I'm glad to be here today with trial lawyer Forrest Taylor, who helps us, again, meet those challenges, especially in cases that are being litigated. Forrest, how are you today, and what have you been working on this week?
I'm doing really well, thank you. We've got a lot of cases in litigation, and one thing that is important with any personal injury claim is proving your injuries, what injuries were related to the case or related to a wreck. And that often involves doctors' depositions, also experts. And that's a very key part of proving a case. And we rely on medical records, again, doctors' depositions, and also expert testimony, where we go out and we actually hire a physician that will come in, look at the medical records, and especially in unique injuries like head injury cases, a lot of times it takes real expertise. And many times we see, for example, a head injury may be overlooked, and it really helps to have experts that we can rely upon that can come in and, again, review the medical records, examine our client, and then help us determine whether or not, is there a head injury and is it related to the wreck? So those are some of the things that we've actually been working on in the last several weeks, getting cases ready for trial and marshaling that medical evidence.
Well, and Forrest, if I could follow up and maybe anchor that down a little bit, when you're referring to medical or doctor depositions, expert depositions, it's essentially their testimony.
Right. That's a good point. So Alabama law, typically you have to have a live witness at trial. There's some exceptions to that, and one exception is under Alabama rules of evidence, we can use a doctor's deposition in lieu of live testimony. And a deposition is an out-of-court sworn testimony where the doctor is almost like being actually in trial, where the attorneys ask questions to the doctor provides testimony under oath, and most of the time we video that deposition, and then that video is shown live at trial. And the reason that doctors have this exception is many times, as most of us know, doctors have a very busy schedule, and we don't want them waiting around the courthouse getting ready for their testimony. So we typically take the deposition at the doctor's convenience, and then we have that in the can, so to speak, and then we will play that video for the jury when the case goes to trial.
And for our listeners, when you're, getting the doctor's testimony, the medical expert's testimony, a couple things that you've touched on. One is to prove, to relate it to the event,
right?
Whether it's a work injury, an automobile wreck, whatever the case may be, and also how that injury has impacted their life.
And that's critical, especially in cases, where there's permanent damage. Because you get one chance. When you go to trial, that's your one chance. You can't come back in 2 years after trial and say, look, this is, I've gotten traumatic arthritis from the injuries from the wreck. I can't work anymore. It's too late. So we have to project, future damages, what type of future impact these injuries would have on our client. So you bring up a very good point, because again, once you sign that release or once you try that case, that's it. You cannot come back and ask for more money. And that's one important function that we have as a trial attorney, is to make sure we cover all the bases as far as future effects of an injury. So yeah, that's an important point you bring up.
And again, in proven injuries, proven damages, could you talk with us about what Alabama law allows? Let's just say, for example, if someone had a prior back surgery, a prior neck surgery, but then they suffer a back or neck injury at work or in an automobile wreck.
In most people, let's say over 30 or 40, they're going to have some arthritic changes. And then some people have had, prior surgeries, back surgeries, and then are in a car wreck. A challenge for us is to identify what was caused by the car wreck versus what the pre-existing condition was, because we have to prove that car wreck either exacerbated or caused new injuries. And sometimes that can be challenging when your client has had, for example, prior back surgeries. And I'm dealing with a case right now where a client had back surgery in 2019, but had been relatively symptom-free for about 3 years until she had this really bad car wreck. And in that case, we can show the gap in the treatment, that she wasn't being treated for back pain until this most recent car wreck. But it is something that, because the injured person is the person bringing the claim, and they have the burden of proof. So we have to show again that this car wreck aggravated, a pre-existing condition. And we can do that through doctor's testimony, a lot of times diagnostic studies, MRIs, X-rays, CT scans, sometimes show new trauma, show edema, and that's like bruising around the bone, and that shows an acute injury. And those are just some of the tools that we can use to differentiate a prior injury from a new injury.
As we move forward to the guests, I did have one last question for you. I know you've taken a lot of doctor and expert, medical experts, other types of expert witness depositions over the years. How many, if you had to estimate, how many would you say you've deposed?
It would be in the thousands. So yeah, it's something that, in almost every case that we file, we are going to have medical experts that we depose or we call live at trial. But yeah, it's in the thousands over the years.
Forrest, I'm really excited about our guest today. I had a phone call earlier in the week with Tom Campbell. We all know him as Termite Tom.
Right.
And he shared with me that as we move forward into the new season, so to speak, and we get into Mother's Day, and I was thinking, well, where's he going with this? He informs me that it's swarming season for the termites, and for termites.
Right.
And he, was reaching out to me to make me aware that that's going on, and it's just something that the people in our community should be aware of.
Well, you're exactly right. I'm real excited to hear what Tom has got to say. Just my personal experience, I've had 2 major termite infestations in my personal home. And, we have inspections every year. They come out, inspect. And in spite of that, we had significant damage, and I was astounded by how much damage was done. Once we started taking the sheetrock off, the studs were gone because they had been eaten away by termites. And so I think this will be very helpful to our viewers because we are in, I think, probably one of the worst areas you can be in for termites. And just the southeast, and the closer you get to the coast, I think the worse the termite problem is. And so I'm very excited to hear what Tom has to say on this issue.
Good morning, Tom. We appreciate you being with us today and being on our podcast. And, you know, we all know you as Tom Campbell, but for some reason, everybody calls you Termite Tom. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and history, what got you into law, and specifically the types of cases you handle now?
Sure. Not a very interesting story, but when I was in law school, I clerked for a big corporate firm, and we had a case where a woman claimed that she was poisoned by application of a termite chemical to her house that they'd pressure washed it, which is not how you treat for termites. And she had a lot of neurological problems. We thought she was crazy, and it would be an easy case to get dismissed. And we had a test done of the surfaces and the air in her house, and she was right. And so I spent a lot of time researching that chemical and how you perform termite control services. And in the process of doing that, I got to be friends with the state regulator in Alabama and realized that that chemical had been taken off the market in 1988. And as a result of that, the new chemicals that came on the market were 4 times more expensive, and the termite companies were not buying enough of it because they didn't raise prices to cover cost. And he predicted that based on how long it takes termites to do damage and how poor inspections in the industry were, that we were going to see an explosion of termite damage claims in the South starting in the late 1990s. And he was exactly right. But I thought, I'll just learn as much as I can about the termite industry and the products that they use. And when the mid 1990s come, I'll be the expert on that issue, and I can help homeowners and other property owners with their termite damage claims. So I sort of planned to do this from the very start of my legal career.
So, Tom, so now here we are 20 to 30 years later. What's the state of the treatment process? Has it gotten better? Have they resolved those issues?
Well, there are 2 things that are principally sold these days to prevent termites. One of them works and one of them's a gimmick. The thing that works is the same thing that's worked since World War II, when they discovered these chemicals could be used for termite control, and that is a chemical barrier under and around your foundation. It's called a liquid treatment. What is popular now in Alabama, because these companies got caught doing fake liquid treatments, which will work 100% of the time if you follow the label directions and apply the treatment correctly. Most of the companies now are selling baiting systems. The most popular one is Centricon. And those systems I call a gimmick because they call it a baiting system, but they don't bait termites to the stations that are placed out around your house. For example, the largest termite service provider in the country, Terminix, said on its website for many years that that was recommended by the entomology department at the University of Kentucky, and as being an effective means of termite control. And they cited an article from the University of Kentucky. And so if you clicked on the article and actually read this academic publication, that article said that the only way a baiting system would work is if you were willing to rely on patience and luck, because there's nothing in those systems that attract termites to the traps in the yard. If they do get in the traps in the yard and they eat the poison that's in those, it will reduce termite populations. But even if it does, and it kills an entire termite colony, what people need to keep in mind in the South is there are anywhere from a dozen to 2 or 3 or 4 dozen termite colonies that are within foraging distance of your eating distance of your house. And studies show that within 3 weeks, if you kill one colony, another colony, since nature abhors a vacuum, will fill that void. And the process of them having to randomly find your bait stations before they find your house and start eating on it starts all over again. So that's sort of the state of where we are in this industry and why so many people have serious termite damage claims, because pest control operators, we find, almost universally do a fake liquid treatment, or they prescribe the wrong service to prevent termites in the first place, that being a baiting system.
Tom, how do people typically reach out to you? What's going on? Is it when they discover termite damage, or the termite company discovers termite damage? How does that typically? How do you typically see that in your office?
Usually what we see is people contact us when they get frustrated with the claims process after they've discovered a termite infestation. And the termite company is either refusing altogether to pay their claim based on some sort of excuse, usually a term of the contract, or they're not agreeing to make the scope of repairs the homeowner thinks is necessary. Increasingly, because of everybody's use of the internet, people will get on the internet and say, I've got a termite infestation problem. What do I do? They'll find our website or the website of another lawyer who knows what they're doing in this field, and they'll figure out that they may have been the victim of a fraud, and they'll call us before they call their termite company. And that usually works out better for the homeowner, because what we do when we get involved early on in a claim like that is we go through what my firm calls the setup and investigation phase. We investigate to make sure the wrong service was either prescribed, or they prescribed the right service and did a fake treatment. And then we set up the termite company by getting them to lie more about why the customer has a termite infestation in the first place. And just by human nature, that makes either a jury or an arbitrator mad when they find out when the pest control company's been caught and the problem that they knew would happen if they prescribed the wrong treatment or did a fake treatment caused damage, that the company's still being dishonest. So the earlier they call us, generally speaking, the better evidence we have that the termite company is, number one, doing the wrong thing, and number two, misrepresenting things to cover it up. And so that's usually how they call us, is they don't call us until they have termite damage.
And Tom, you had mentioned, and I know we've discussed this in the past, I've had the opportunity to talk with you and discuss the process, and I've also watched some of your presentations, and I know this is an area that you really enjoy, but you had mentioned that sometimes people get frustrated with the claim process. So if a homeowner discovers termite damage, should they, what's the best way to handle that? Which way do you prefer? Do you prefer them trying to handle the claim on their own? Because again, I know you mentioned sometimes they reach out after they're frustrated with the claim process.
Yeah, what we prefer is, And I'll tell you what usually goes through the mind of people that wind up being clients of us. And it's one thing that termite companies rely upon. You know, they're in the business of providing fake termite prevention service usually, and they're in the business of making that business model work by deceiving their customers once they find out they have a damage claim. And the principal thing that they rely upon uh, to cheat people in the claims process is uh, psychological denial. None of us want to admit to ourselves or entertain the thought that the house that provides us our security and a place of solitude and comfort is badly damaged, that could have terrible financial consequences or that could disrupt their family life for a considerable period of time if they need major repairs. Uh, and so I couldn't tell you how many times uh, we've had somebody call and say, you know, the termite company's not wanting to make repairs. All I have is damage to my baseboard. Can you write a letter to them and get them to come and fix my baseboard? Uh, and they're convinced that the only thing the termite company has eaten is a baseboard or a window frame. And most termite damage is hidden. And so if somebody's got a window frame eaten up or a baseboard eaten up, usually, especially in South Alabama around the Dothan area or anywhere within a couple of 100 miles of the coast in the southeast, the termites that are doing the damage are a subterranean termite called Formosan termites. And there are millions of termites in those colonies. And if they get exposed to the air, they dehydrate and die within a matter of a couple of hours. And so they're doing damage inside the wall. And usually the last thing they do is once they've eaten the wall, they'll eat through the baseboard as they're foraging randomly to find additional wood. And so if you've got an eaten up baseboard, even the experts for the termite companies, I was in a trial yesterday, and the defense experts admitted that what you need to do when you've got termite damage in a wall, for example, is you need to assume that you're going to have to replace the entire wall from one corner of the building to the other corner of the building and replace everything from the sill plate all the way to the roof line. And so what I would advise people to do is don't bury your head in the sand and don't call your termite company. You need to figure out what's wrong with your house and how bad the problem probably is. And the last person you want to rely upon to give you an honest answer to that question is the company that didn't do their job and has every incentive in the world to misrepresent the scope of the likely problem that they caused. And so what we like people to do is as soon as they find termite damage, get in touch with us. Let us start our investigation. We usually will supervise behind the scenes, having state regulators do an investigation so that they can seize the company's records or at least inspect them to see what their records show about what the service was they've provided in the past. We have our entomologists and contractors go out and inspect the property. Uh, and we've done a full investigation before we ever disclose that we're involved in the claim to the termite company or their insurance company. And what I like to tell the lawyers in my office, and we've got 8 lawyers that do nothing but handle termite damage claims, is if we do our job in the setup and investigation phase, we should know about 90% of the facts that anybody could reasonably expect to introduce if we had to take that case to trial down the road. Because for a liquid termite treatment, there's really only one way to properly do a termite treatment, and you have to do drilling in the foundation. You have to apply the chemicals according to a mathematical formula. And if you know that stuff, you can usually prove with mathematical certainty that they did a fake termite treatment. because the industry is regulated by state and federal regulations. They have to keep records as long as your property is under bond that detail specifically what they did every time they went to your property. And so we can usually look at those records and see how much chemical they claim that they applied and mathematically calculate that they did a fake termite treatment. And not only that, what we do is we want to show that they not only cheated the client that we have in the case, we want to show that they did this as a business practice and a business model. We live in the Bible Belt, and I'm as guilty as anyone else. I'm a sucker for a redemption story, and if somebody says they're sorry and they didn't do it on purpose, my instinct is to believe them. And that's the instinct of juries, and that's the instinct of arbitrators. And so we try to build a case to show that what happened at our client's house, the faulty service at our client's house, is not an accident. It's not mere negligence. It's not a mistake. It's intentional wrongdoing.
Thank you for listening to the Trials Podcast. We're going to continue this conversation with Tom Campbell in the next episode. We would encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss out. If you have any questions or concerns, we're easy to find at GartlanInjuryLaw.com.